Many people were obsessed with immortality, and many famous leaders in the past, and maybe some present leaders, just can't accept the fact that life is going to end for them just like anybody else. But the story that I'm going to share with you today is a very special story, and we're not talking about any emperor, and we're not talking about any way he tried to achieve immortality, and in a way, he may have done just that. In this episode, which is a word power episode, we're going to talk about the Terra Cotta army of Huang. This is your host Danny, and this is a new word power episode from English Plus Podcast. So before we begin, let me remind you that you can practice every single thing, and by saying every single thing here, I'm talking about the words that we're going to learn in today's context, which is the Terra Cotta army of Huang. You can practice these words both in digital format, if you prefer to do it on your PC, tablet, or mobile phone. And of course, there's also the PDF practice worksheet that you can download, print out, and practice anytime you want if you prefer pen and paper. And the PDF has something special that it doesn't only have practice for today's episode, but also it has a review part for the previous 4 word power episodes. So if you would like to get all that, all you have to do is to take the link you can find in the show notes and go to my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, where you will have all that ready and waiting for you. And for those of you who would like even more, and you would like to unlock access to everything on English Plus Podcast, especially the premium episodes that I create every day, for every single free episode on English Plus Podcast, there is a premium episode. If you would like to unlock access to that, you can take the second link you can find in the show notes and go to my Patreon page, become a patron, and by doing that, you will be supporting me to create more of the content you love and at the same time get great benefits. So what are you waiting for? Take your English and learning to the next level with me and with English Plus Podcast. And now, without further ado, let's talk about the Terra Cotta army of Huang. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Early in its history, China was split into 5 independent and warring states until 13-year-old Zheng ascended the throne of the state of Qin in 246 BC. Assuming the title Qing Shi Huangdi, or First Emperor of the Qin, he defeated the other states one by one and managed to solidify the country. What was achieved in his brief 10-year reign is extraordinary. The Great Wall of China was completed, weights and measures were standardized, the system of writing was unified, and a network of roads and canals was built. For all his achievements, however, Huang was an autocrat and would brook no opposition to his total authority. Maleficent and suspicious, he had all texts of Confucianism burned and the scholars banished, buried alive, or beheaded. The emperor was obsessed with the idea of death. Always fearful of some fatal disease, he engaged in a perpetual search for an elixir. Huang began the construction of his tomb on the day that he took office. Although archaeologists have just begun to uncover the elaborate chambers beneath an earth mount called Mount Li, historians from the emperor's time left vivid descriptions of buried wealth and sumptuous decoration. What there is no record of is an underground vault which would be discovered in 1974 by Chinese peasants digging a well. Excavation of the enormous underground chamber revealed 7,000 life-size terracotta warriors and their horses in battle formation, a whole clay army interred as if to follow the emperor into immortality. Facing east, the vanguard consists of rows of crossbow and longbow bearers, followed by the main force of armored soldiers holding real metal spears and dagger axes. Surface treatment made the weapons resistant to rust and corrosion, so that even after being buried for over 2,000 years, they are still functional. 35 terracotta horse-drawn chariots bring up the rear of the emperor's entourage. Some of the astonishingly realistic figures are upright, intact, and seemingly poised for attack. Others lie smashed and scattered, the result of looting by soldiers from the succeeding reign. All of the faces on the pottery figures have distinctly different features as if they were modeled after actual people. Like real soldiers' faces, they reflect everything from ferocity to confidence. The warriors wear tight-sleeved outer robes, short coats of painted chain-mail armor, and windproof caps, all fashioned from the clay. The sculpted horses, too, are richly detailed with curled forelocks and knotted tails. The Terra Cotta army of Huang can be added to the accomplishments that made his reign a turning point in China's history. Its magnificence remains undiminished, suggesting that the emperor may have found immortality after all. So, that was our story about the Terra Cotta army, and I hope you learned something about the Terra Cotta army you didn't know about before. And now, of course, we come to the core of this episode, the word power episode, and we have 10 words we're going to learn in context. Let me tell you about these 10 words. We're going to learn the words solidify, autocrat, brook, maleficent, perpetual, elixir, sumptuous, inter, vanguard, and entourage. So, are you ready to learn these words? Of course, why else would you be here? We're gonna start with the very first word, so don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. So our very first word is solidify. S-O-L-I-D-I-F-Y. Solidify. Now, as usual, I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to take some time and try to answer the question, and then I'm going to reveal the answer, of course, and add some information about this word to make sure you really understand this word. But remember, the only way you're going to add this word and the words that will come after it to your active vocabulary bank is to practice. And there's plenty of practice on this post that I created specifically for this episode. The link is just right there in the show notes. So maybe after you finish listening to the episode, just go there, just see all those exercises waiting for you. Maybe you don't want to do the exercises right away, and that's fine, by the way, that's even better. Maybe you will try to come tomorrow and do the exercises and come a couple of days later and review the exercises, which will help you add these words to your active vocabulary bank. But that being said, let's move back to solidify. Now, of course, before I ask you the question, let me remind you how we use this word in context. We said, assuming the title of Qin Shi Huang Di, or First Emperor of the Qin, he defeated the other states one by one and managed to solidify the country. So that is solidify. Now, which word or words could best replace solidify in this context? Do you think we could replace it with make strong, erode, devour, or ruin completely? Which do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back with a little bit more to talk about this word. So for those of you who thought make strong is the best answer, you're absolutely right. If something such as a position or opinion is to solidify, if you want to solidify an opinion or a position or a country, like in our example, this thing, position, opinion, country becomes firmer, stronger, and more definite and unlikely to change. And that's exactly what Shi Huangdi did. He solidified the country. He made it stronger. And by the way, we can use the same word solidify for liquids. When liquids solidify, they change into a solid. That's the original meaning of solidify, but as you could see, we can use it in other contexts as well, and it's a lot more interesting when we use it in other contexts. So, that was our very first word, solidify, but of course you know that we still have 9 more words, so don't go anywhere, because now we're going to talk about the next word, autocrat. A-U-T-O-C-R-A-T. Autocrat. Now let's remember how we used that in context. We said, for all his achievements, however, Shi Huangdi was an autocrat and would brook no opposition to his total authority. So, this is our context, and the word is autocrat, remember? So, an autocrat can be best explained as what? As a scholar? As a lover of animals? As one who makes a loud outcry? Or as a ruler having unlimited power? Which do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought a ruler having unlimited power, you're absolutely right, because that's exactly what an autocrat is. An autocrat is a person in authority who has complete power. And we don't usually use this word as a positive word. That kind of means like dictator or tyrant or big brother. Or if you want to use that for someone in your company, you might mean control freak, of course. Could be tyrant, could be dictator as well, but definitely we use this word to talk about a person in authority who has complete power, and it's not a positive word. Remember that. And within the same context, we mentioned another word, which is brook. B-R-O-O-K. Let me remind you again. We said, for all his achievements, however, Huang was an autocrat and would brook no opposition to his total authority. Would brook no opposition. What does that mean? Which word or words do you think could best replace brook in this context? Could we replace it with restore, with allow, with express objections to, or with shield? So, which do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought allow is the best word to replace brook in this context, you're absolutely right. If someone in a position of authority will brook no interference or opposition, they will not accept any interference or opposition from others. They will not tolerate it. They cannot stand it. They cannot allow it. So that is the meaning of brook. Now, of course, brook has another meaning, which is a stream when it comes as a noun, but here we used brook as a verb. So remember that. We can use brook in a totally different meaning when we use it as a verb. And that's not the last of our words for today, of course. We have the next word, which you might remember from the famous film Maleficent. We have the exact same word. Well, Maleficent was the name of the character Angelina played in that movie. But here, we used it as just a simple word, of course, not to refer to the movie. Let's see how we spell this word. And trust me, the spelling is a little bit tricky, so pay attention to the spelling of Maleficent. M-A-L-E-F-I-C-E-N-T. Maleficent. And let's see how we use that in context. Of course, we use this word to describe the emperor. We said maleficent and suspicious. He had all texts on Confucianism burned and the scholars banished, buried alive, or beheaded. He did all that because he was maleficent and suspicious. So, what is that word? What is maleficent? Someone who is maleficent can be best described as what? As well-intentioned? As committing harm? As guilty? Or as understanding? Which do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought committing harm is the best way to describe a maleficent person, you're absolutely right. Maleficent means causing or capable of producing evil or mischief. When we talk about a person like that, we're talking about a corrupt person, a destructive person, a malevolent person. Definitely not a good person. And remember, we already used autocrat. We said he brooked no opposition, maleficent. They all apply to this emperor. Of course, he had great achievements, historically great achievements, but doesn't mean that he was a good person. But anyway, our word is maleficent. And maybe now, finally, you can understand the meaning of the title of that famous movie. And there are two of them, I guess, Maleficent 1 and Maleficent 2. Anyway, let's move on to the next word, perpetual. P-E-R-P-E-T-U-A-L, perpetual. Now, for those of you who play chess, you know exactly what perpetual means. Like when we say perpetual check, that's something you do if you want to force a draw in the game. But anyway, if you don't play chess, that all sounds gibberish to you. And let's focus on how perpetual was used in our context. We said the emperor was obsessed with the idea of death. Always fearful of some fatal disease, he engaged in a perpetual search of an elixir. So, perpetual search for an elixir. Now, we'll get to elixir next, but our word here is perpetual. Now, which word do you think could best replace perpetual in this context? Could we replace it with continuing for an indefinitely long time, imposingly large, quiet and hesitant, or outside established limits? Which do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought continuing for an indefinitely long time, you're absolutely right. That's the meaning of perpetual. A perpetual feeling, state, or quality is one that never ends or changes. And that's the idea of a perpetual check in chess. If you are able to perpetually check your opponent, that means your opponent can't win anymore, and after this perpetual check, you get a draw. Even if you are in a worse position, if you can achieve this perpetual, this continuous, that doesn't end check, you can achieve draw. And of course, here we're talking about perpetual search. He did that continuously. He never stopped looking or searching for an elixir. And that is exactly the word that I'm going to talk about next, elixir. How do we spell that word? It's E-L-I-X-I-R, elixir. So what does that mean? If you would like to remember again, we said the emperor was obsessed with the idea of death. Always fearful of some fatal disease, he engaged in a perpetual search for an elixir. What does that mean? An elixir in this context can be best explained as what? As a long buried treasure, as a medicine believed to cure all illnesses, as a small flag or pennant, or as a space under the floor of an ancient Chinese building. So which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought medicine believed to cure all illnesses is the meaning of elixir, you're absolutely right. An elixir is a liquid that is considered to have magical powers, like a potion that cures everything. Now, you might have come across the word in a video game, for example. If you play video games, there are potions and elixirs all over the place, especially if you're playing a game that includes some magicians and stuff like that. I bet you've come across this word before. But if you haven't, this is the word. It means a magical potion that cures everything, all diseases, and of course, it guarantees a long life or maybe immortality. And famously, it's also known as the elixir of life. That's something as famous as the Holy Grail, let's say. But anyway, that was our word, elixir, and that is a new word we learned in today's context, and that's not the last one. Next, we have the word sumptuous. S-U-M-P-T-U-O-U-S. Sumptuous. Now let's remember how we use that in context. We said, Huang began the construction of his tomb on the day he took office. Although archaeologists have just begun to uncover the elaborate chambers beneath the earth mound called Mount Li, historians from the emperor's time left vivid descriptions of buried wealth and sumptuous decoration. That is our word, sumptuous, right? Now my question is, which word do you think could best replace sumptuous in this context? Could we replace it with honorable, intended, extravagant, or carved? Which do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought extravagant is the answer, you're absolutely right. Something that is sumptuous is grand and obviously very expensive. Something luxurious, something rich, extravagant, and definitely expensive. And that's the meaning of sumptuous decoration. We're not talking about some simple decoration. No, sumptuous decoration. Expensive, extravagant. And that was our word. And the next word is inter. I-N-T-E-R. Let's remember how we use that in context. We said, excavation of the enormous underground chamber revealed 7,000 life-size terracotta warriors and their horses in battle formation, a whole clay army interred, as if to follow the emperor into immortality. Interred. So, that is our word. Which word or words do you think could best replace inter in this context? Could we replace it with elevated, transported, restricted, or buried? Which one do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought buried is the answer, you're absolutely right. Well, of course, bury is the more common word, but inter is another word. I will have to say it's a little bit more literary, yeah, but it can be used as well. It can be used as a formal word or as a literary word. When a dead person is interred, they are buried. Simply, it means to bury a dead person. So that is the meaning of interred. Interred as if to follow. The whole clay army was interred as if to follow the emperor into immortality. And since we're talking about the army, we have a word that has to do with the army, and that is vanguard. V-A-N-G-U-A-R-D, vanguard. Let's see how we use that in context. We said, facing east, The vanguard consists of rows of crossbow and longbow bearers, followed by the main force of armored soldiers holding real metal spears and dagger axes. So, the word is vanguard. Now, what do you think? A vanguard can be best described as what? As a wide, flat surface? As a cultural tradition? As those occupying the foremost position? Or as the place where something originates? So, what do you think vanguard means? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought those occupying the foremost position, you're absolutely right. And when we talk about the vanguard of an army, we're talking about the part of it that goes into battle first. That's the vanguard of an army. But vanguard can be used in other interesting contexts. For example, if someone is in the vanguard of something such as a revolution or an area of research, they are involved in the most advanced part of it. You can also refer to the people themselves as the vanguards. So, that is also another way you can use vanguard, not only for army, but also for people who are in an advanced position. Remember, we said those occupying the foremost position in an area of research, a revolution, or of course, as we had it in our context, in an army. And that was our word vanguard, and that brings me to the very last word we're going to talk about today, and this word is entourage. And you might say that word sounds French. Well, it is actually, because it comes from French. Entourage is spelled Entourage, entourage. It is not entourage, because you might be tempted to pronounce it as pure English, and if you want to pronounce it as pure English, it would be entourage. But it's definitely not entourage, it's entourage. Entourage, it's a je, not a j, alright? So it's entourage. But of course, let's see how we use this word in our context. We said 35 Terra Cotta horse-drawn chariots bring up the rear of the emperor's entourage. And before that, we talked about all the soldiers, the vanguard, and the others. And finally, those horse chariots that bring up the rear of the emperor's entourage. So, when we talk about entourage, how can we best describe this word? Can we describe it as a luxurious palace? Can we describe it as a primitive device for recording speed? Can we describe it as a group of attendants or associates? Or can we describe it as stately march-like dance? Which do you think is the right answer? Think about it, and I'll be right back. Now, for those of you who thought a group of attendants or associates, you're absolutely right. A famous or important person's entourage is the group of assistants, servants, or other people who travel with him. Now, of course, sometimes, or maybe most of the times, this can be pretentious because you actually don't need all these people, one to hand you the towel, the other one to hand you the bottle of water or something like that. But famous people tend to do that and they kind of like it. But anyway, I'm not here to judge. We're not here to judge, actually. We're just here to learn the word. And you will find a lot of use to this word, entourage. So as we said, the people who assist, usually, of course, a famous or important person. The company of this person, the following, the staff, the retinue. And all these 7,000 Terra Cotta warriors were the entourage of that famous Chinese emperor. And with that, we come to the last word for today's episode. I'll remind you again, we started with solidify, then we talked about autocrat, brook, as a verb, not a noun, maleficent, not the character of Angelina Jolie, but the meaning of the word, perpetual, elixir, sumptuous, inter, vanguard, and finally, entourage. And with that, we come to the end of today's episode, but I will have to remind you, and I know my reminding you over and over can be a little bit annoying for some of you. I understand that, but trust me, because it is very important, and that's just for your betterment. That's why I keep saying that. Don't just listen to the episode and do nothing. Well, that's very good, of course. After all, you learned about the Terra Cotta army, you learned about something interesting, you learned about these words, and there's a very good chance that most of these words, if not all of them, are added to your passive vocabulary bank. That means you can understand these words, you can recognize these words if you see them in a context, but maybe you're reading something, or maybe you will catch it when someone uses it in conversation or whatever, and you will understand this word and you'll be happy about that, of course. And that is precious. But what's even more precious than that is that if you can use the words on your own, if you can use them yourselves in your own speaking and writing, that's what I keep saying is the active vocabulary bank. The bank of words that you can use, and you can use correctly, obviously, And there's only one way you can achieve that, and it is by practicing these words. Because this will help you in two different things. First of all, it will solidify the words in your active vocabulary bank. Remember the word solidify? And secondly, it will help you not forget these words in the long run. Because trust me, in a day or two, you will forget about most of these words if you don't practice them. And if you really want to take it to the next level, it's very easy. The link is right here in the show notes. It will take you to my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com, to the custom post I created for this episode, where you have all the practice you need. And whether you like pen and paper, there's a PDF practice worksheet that you can download, print out, and practice the words of this episode and the previous 4 Word Power episodes. Or if you would prefer to do everything on your screen, whatever that screen is, you can do that as well, because I have digital exercises in the same post that you can do on your phone, on your tablet, or on your PC. So I left you with no excuses at all. If you really want to take it a step further, you have to do that. And of course, one last thing, I hope you're not getting annoyed by me saying that all the time, but it is my livelihood. So I have to remind you all the time that if you want to become my patron, there's another link in the description that will take you to my Patreon page where you can become my patron. And by doing that, of course, I will be so grateful, because in this way you will be supporting me and helping me create more of this content that you love. And it is a win-win. It's not only that, by becoming a patron, you will have access to all the premium content that I make available only to my patrons on Patreon, including, of course, the premium episodes that I create for every single free episode that I publish here on English Plus Podcast. Now, with that being said, I would like to thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. This is your host, Danny. I will see you next time.